Hello there and welcome to the second episode of the Foxhole. In this episode I'll be taking a closer look at the classic concept of 4X games and their journey through time. My name is Foxhound and without further dilly-dally, let's get started. Back in the 90s when strategy games took the world of gaming by storm, there was pretty much only one type that would come to signify what the quintessential strategy game was. I already covered how the games were set apart in different subgenres, but they all shared the same focus in game mechanics. A focus split 4 ways. Exploring your surroundings to gain a better grasp of your options, exploiting whatever available resources you can gain access to, expanding your base of operations to support a greater war effort, which should lead you to exterminating your enemy or enemy to be as a way of winning the game or furthering your dominance over other factions. These focus points of course came to be known as the 4X type of strategy game, but they are fairly simplistic just by looking at them. Therefore, I will be examining more specifically how these points are implemented in the 4X games we've come to call classics. Take Age of Empires. In every game session you start out by getting some workers to work on resource gathering, but given that there are several types of resources, you already have to make a choice about the worker distribution for those resources. You then have a choice about what military building and units to make, since you know your opponent is likely to attempt an early raid on your base, or maybe you're the one doing the raiding. As such, you need to know the map, also because you're going to be building a new base at one point to secure more resources or a strategic stronghold. This pattern of gameplay is repeated in basically every strategy game you could get your hands on. Dune, Warcraft, Starcraft, Command & Conquer, Civilization, Heroes of Might and Magic, all of the most well-known strategy franchises regardless of subgenre. 2002 marked the first big break in 4X games with Starcraft. Not the game itself, but rather its editor. More specifically, that was the year the custom map Aeon of Strife was made. It took the concept of hero units, which were strong units with special abilities, and fleshed out an entire game mode around controlling one of them. This change was radical, so much so that it years later came to be known as the first MOBA, Multiplayer Online Battle Arena. When the time came for the 0-hour expansion for Command & Conquer Generals in 2003, the classic formula was married to the concept of specialized playstyles. This took the shape of generals, where you would select one of 3 themes to affect your playstyle. In typical games of the era, you had a couple of different factions that made up the entire variety of gameplay. Here, however, was another layer that made your chosen faction feel even more unique and a part of a greater military entity, which also provided much greater replay value. 2004 was the year of the squad. Not the squid, but the squad. The year that both Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth and Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War revolutionized strategy gaming with fresh gameplay and new concepts, but especially the squad mechanic was core to these games. Rather than having individual units, you now had groups of individual units that would stay together, fight together, and die together. Squads were easier to select, move around, and manage. It wasn't just a matter of user-friendliness, however, as there were 2 more distinct pearls of innovation hiding behind it. In the case of Battle for Middle-earth, one of these was veterancy. This wasn't a new thing, however, just look at Red Alert 2. In that game, veteran units typically just dealt more damage, but given that they were still fragile, hard to select and micro when amongst a group of non-veteran units, serving them was really cumbersome to do. Considering the extra micromanagement it required, it was easier to just buy more units if they were lost. As such, the veterancy system wasn't an integral part of Red Alert 2. In fact, it would probably have been just as popular without it. Contrast this to Battle for Middle-earth, where units in the squads could die, but as long as just one unit survived, the entire squad would survive. This made unit preservation much easier, and there were a lot of veterancy levels as a result, continuously rewarding the player for taking care. The last pearl of innovation had to do with resources. I mentioned that just one unit had to survive for its squad to survive, but I didn't talk about replenishment. Well, in traditional games with individual units, every unit lost meant an equal loss of investment of resources. In Battle for Middle-earth, however, squads could be replenished to their full size for free, which meant a huge economic difference between killing most units in a squad and killing all the units. The important thing to note here is that these 3 elements would work nowhere near as well if they didn't come together to form this triple combo of innovative symbiotic goodness. All of this signified a radical departure from the old-fashioned way of spamming individual throwaway units to this new philosophy of controlling cohesive groups that you actually had to take care of. Battle for Middle-earth and Dawn of War didn't just dispense with the lack of unit preservation philosophy. Dawn of War also made a departure from the 4X formula by leaving behind traditional resource gathering in the favor of capturing sectors at predetermined locations. This wasn't a new concept, however, as Zed back in 1996 already used sectors and the capturing of factories to make units, completely dispensing with resources. For its time, however, Zed delivered quite significant variety, and whether or not this inspired EA or Relic, it certainly wasn't the last time that implementation was to be seen. In 2006, Company of Heroes used a mix of Zero Hour and Dawn of War as a foundation for a much more modern departure from 4X. Its secret weapon? A tactical combat system based on Dawn of War but hugely improved, except for melee combat. Melee was gone. In traditional strategy games, the purpose of units were simply to spam their attack, reducing the health bar of other units to 0, and though units could differ in stats or crowd control abilities, they all served that singular goal of killing the enemy. But one example of the new system was that a machine gun team could now suppress entire waves of enemy infantry instead of just being an instrument of destruction. Unit phasing and directional cover were now also important factors to consider, which meant two things. One was that army size was no longer the deciding factor of a battle, but rather the unit composition and their manner of use. The second thing was the transformation of flanking, the military tactic of attacking the enemy from an angle he doesn't expect. In traditional games, this was an option too, but if your flanking force wasn't large enough, it would easily be repelled. But in Company of Heroes, a single flanking unit could wreak havoc if used correctly. And that transformed the maneuver from somewhat irrelevant to feeling absolutely ecstatic to pull off. Once again, a significant shift in philosophy had happened, this time for unit roles and their positioning. In 2007, Supreme Commander came out, and while it was a unique game, it was also a fairly traditional 4X in how it played. But it did introduce a new mechanic to me that would come to be one of my favorites, the adjacency system. This was a series of bonuses that applied to buildings if they were placed next to other certain buildings. This sounds very simplistic, but it forces the player to prioritize and make choices. Furthermore, the decision-making scales with the amount of available bonuses, and before you know it, you have a rich source of extra replay value. Yet again, this was a shift in philosophy from building placement being largely irrelevant to becoming a strategic puzzle of logistics. At this point, you might be noticing a pattern appearing. The fact that I keep mentioning philosophy. That's because I really believe it's a matter of philosophy, a paradigm shift in how we think about playing games. Ask yourself this: how many games with some revolutionary mechanic or system did not force you to look at the game from a different perspective than you were used to? These are games that changed the way an entire genre is played, and to me, that's a milestone of enormous magnitude for the history of gaming. Thank you so much for watching. When do you think a game stops being 4X? Tell me in a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, drop me a like. If you want more of these videos, do subscribe, and if you'd like to support me, you can donate on PayPal as well. See you next time.